Okay, so then I guess we'll move on to Dana then. Dana. We're good right here. I think that's good. All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me here. I'm Dana Larsen, and I've been working in the field of marijuana and drug policy reform for pretty much all of my adult life, over 2 decades now. I got my start in university as a student. I formed a club on campus called the League for Ethical Action on Drugs, and we'd put on events and speakers there. After I graduated, I met Mark Emery and worked with him for 10 years on Cannabis Culture magazine. In that time, I helped create the BC Marijuana Party and the Canadian Marijuana Party, and I worked a lot on that seed catalog of his over the years as well. And in 2005, I helped open the Vancouver Seed Bank after Mark couldn't sell seeds anymore because he was facing extradition. And a few years later, in 2008, I opened the Vancouver Cannabis Dispensary, and we're now serving over 5,000 patients from 2 locations. And most recently, I launched a campaign called Sensible BC, which was an effort to collect signatures to force a referendum vote in British Columbia so that we could decriminalize the possession of cannabis as a first step towards legalization. And people have asked me over the years, why is marijuana so important to you? Why are you focused on this issue, especially when it's inevitable that it's going to be legalized any day now? People have been saying that for 20 years. But to me, what I like about the issue of cannabis, and really the broader issue of drug policy, is how it ties into so many other areas of social and fundamental justice. If you're interested in healthcare, well, certainly in our dispensaries, I see every day how marijuana helps patients who need it, and also how it gets them off pharmaceutical drugs in many instances, and they stop using their prescriptions and get the same or greater medical benefit from using this natural plant, which is not only better for their health, but also is actually saving taxpayers money as well. So it's a win-win for everybody. And if you're interested in issues of racism or criminal justice, well, certainly our marijuana and drug laws are disproportionately focused on minority groups and on young people and other disadvantaged groups in our society. And certainly a lot of people who are in prison are there because of prohibition, because of these laws that hurt so many people. And if you're just interested in the economy and in money, well, marijuana is one of our biggest industries in British Columbia. It's worth billions of dollars, and if properly regulated and taxed and controlled, that could benefit every British Columbian in many ways. And whether if you're interested in the environment and industry, well, we know that the advantages of cannabis hemp and how that plant can provide seed food, which is doing now across our country. You can buy cannabis seed food in stores, and hemp fabric is also making an increase, although it's harder to get that infrastructure in place. But we've seen all these things, how the benefits of this plant. And so for me, I feel like marijuana is a linchpin issue in many ways, and that if we can change the laws and pull out that peg, it'll result in a lot of other positive changes to our society, and perhaps the beginning of the end of the greater drug war as well. Because although I think marijuana is very important, like John said, I think it goes beyond marijuana, and how we treat drug policy in general needs to change in this country and around the world, but marijuana is that first step. And over the years, we've seen a lot of victories in this campaign. We've made a lot of changes. When we started 20 years ago, most Canadians and certainly most British Columbians did not support marijuana law reform. It had a minority support in our country. You couldn't buy a bong or a grow book about marijuana because of laws that Mulrooney passed, some of the most severe censorship laws in the world. And those laws are still on the books, by the way. And in fact, what we found over the years is a lot of these laws stay on the books, they just get ignored. But now in Canada, bongs and grow books and seeds are widely available, largely because of Mark Emery and the campaign he launched that was picked up by so many others. Medical marijuana is widely available through dispensaries like the ones I operate, but also now from the government as well. And it's not the greatest program, but it's a really big step forward. And public opinion is on our side as well. We have a strong majority, about 7 out of 10 British Columbians support legalization or decriminalization in some form, depending how you ask the question. And a strong majority of Canadians as well, I think it's more like 6 out of 10, support some kind of marijuana reform as well. So there's broad support for this. We've seen a lot of positive change happen. And also one of those big changes was that we can grow hemp in Canada now. That was passed by the Liberal government. It didn't require a lawsuit or intensive lobbying. Now we have illegal hemp in Canada. It's been grown all across the country for almost 20 years now. And although I'd say the hemp industry is still too tightly regulated, it's a part of the normalization and acceptance process of this plant that you can now see a hemp leaf or a cannabis leaf in your regular grocery store and all kinds of products. And when you're eating cannabis seeds as part of your diet, it helps you to understand this is only a plant and not some terribly dangerous, demonized substance that we need to be afraid of. So we've made a lot of positive change in Canada over the years. I've been proud to be a part of that, but at the same time, the laws have actually gotten more severe and worse over the years. And right now, we're at a position where we have some of the most severe laws for cultivation that we've had in this country for a very long time. And we've also seen possession charges increasing across Canada as well. Since Harper became our Prime Minister, and we've seen the marijuana possession charges go up every year across Canada. They're 30% higher across Canada now than they were 7 or 8 years ago. And in British Columbia, we've had the brunt of that, where they've more than doubled the possession charges in our province in that time. Not in Vancouver, where there's a really tolerant attitude toward cannabis, but in the rest of the province, under RCMP control, we've seen marijuana charges really increase. And so it's time for a change. You know, Canadians are ready for it, especially here in British Columbia, we're ready for it. But it's going to require a change at the federal level. But it's not only a federal law. The provinces and the cities and municipalities have a huge role to play in this as well. And that was one of the motivations behind our Sensible BC campaign, to show that provinces have control over policing. Provinces are the ones that pay all the costs of prohibition. And all these new mandatory minimum laws that Harper has brought in, those will all be served in provincial prisons and paid for by provincial budgets. So he's passing these laws that he's not going to have to pay for federally. He's passing it off to the provinces. And when the RCMP in British Columbia decide to double the number of possession charges they make, that's actually something the Provincial Attorney General is supposed to have control over. The provincial government is supposed to be setting the goals and priorities for the police, and they should be acting on that. And so while I agree that decriminalization isn't the final step, and I oppose the decriminalization that involves ticketing or those kind of alternate punishments, our campaign was to decriminalize by having the police spend no more money or time on making any arrests for marijuana possession, to simply ignore that. And that, I think, would be a very positive step forward in showing that as British Columbians, we want to change in federal law. And that is, in fact, what we did as a province when it came to the long gun registry. We refused to enforce that law, as did a majority of other provinces. They simply told their police, if you come across a citizen, an otherwise law-abiding citizen in possession of an unregistered long gun, you should leave them alone. Well, we should have the same policy towards marijuana. And that is basically the policy in Vancouver as well. A lot of other marijuana laws also get ignored. Like we see, the bong laws and the pipe laws and the grow book laws are still in place, but they're essentially ignored across Canada. And the law against selling seeds is also not really enforced that well, certainly not in the big cities. But our final goal must be ultimately a change in federal law. And so I'm very happy that Trudeau and the Liberals have come out with a strong stand for legalization. It's something that no other major party has done ever, to have the leader and the party policy both pointing in the same direction towards legalization. But I think the question we want to look at, especially in a meeting like this, is what form will that legalization take, and what kind of model are we looking at? Because we have a model now of medical marijuana, which I think is very dangerous and harmful, and that's a model that could easily be converted into a kind of legalization that I don't want to see. I don't want to see a legalization where only certain people are allowed to grow cannabis, or is it somebody who grows it for themselves and their friends faces a very severe jail penalty, which we have now. We're going to have hundreds of companies being licensed by Health Canada under our Conservative government to grow and sell marijuana to Canadians. Yet at the same time, we have very severe penalties for growing just a few plants for yourself in your garden and sharing them with your friends and family. That seems to me very untenable and something that really should not last. And so what I would like to see for legalization is a system that allows Canadians to grow some cannabis for themselves, but that also has cannabis products high quality and low price readily available, so that people won't want to bother growing for themselves. You know, we have a system with wine and beer right now that I think would work very well for marijuana, where Canadians, if they choose, can brew their own wine or their own beer in their home. There's a limit on how much they can make, and there's some rules around that. But if you want to do that for yourself and to share it with your friends, you can. And if you want to sell that product, you can't do that without a license and some controls. But our wine industry is not dominated by a certain monopolized group or only certain big companies. The wine industry in Canada has room for big players that make a lot of wine, also a lot of room for niche wineries as well that produce small quantities of certain types of product. And I think wine and marijuana compare very well to each other, because unlike cigarettes, where a tobacco smoker typically only consumes one kind of tobacco, both cannabis users and wine drinkers want to explore different kinds and different flavors and tastes. And with cannabis, there's even more varieties than with wine because there's different effects and different cannabinoid profiles. So it goes beyond simply things like taste that would differentiate wine varieties. So I would like to see a marijuana industry in Canada that accommodates both large-scale and small-scale producers and allows people to grow their own cannabis at home. But one final point I'll leave you with is that I really think the focus of legalization, thinking it's going to mean people smoking joints and doing bong hits, that's not what legalization is going to look like, in my opinion. I actually believe that full legalization will result in less people smoking marijuana and people consuming it in a wide variety of other ways. I don't see legalization bringing people who aren't smoking joints now are going to start doing it. They might consume marijuana in a capsule or a pill. They might rub it on their skin to treat arthritis or eczema. Those kind of products, I think, are going to become more available. And I think smoking joints and buds and having that perfectly manicured bud will still be there for certain people who are into that kind of thing, but that's not going to be what legalization is going to look like. And I really believe that full legalization will be the day when our farmers can grow cannabis in their fields of any potency. And that even if right now, if our hemp farmers were to extract the resin that they're growing on their seeded buds, they're actually producing twice as much resin on our hemp farms than all the resin being consumed by Canadians recreationally and medicinally right now. And that resin is being mulched back and put back into the earth. Now that's a high CBD resin. It won't necessarily get you very high, but there's a great medicinal value to that product. It's a waste product that our hemp farmers are throwing away. Twice as much resin as all the cannabis being consumed in Canada right now. If they could keep that product, they could sell it for a very cheap price. You could have high-potency products available for $1 a gram or less, and that's including taxes. And I think that's the kind of legalization we need to be looking at. And if the price of marijuana product is substantially lower than it is now, that's how we get rid of home cultivation. That's how we get rid of organized crime. If legalized marijuana means I can go to a store and buy a bud for $10 a gram, that's a start. That'll improve some things. But that won't stop people bothering to grow their own because it's still an incredibly valuable plant. It'll still won't stop the underground trade because there's so much value to it. But if we get the price of cannabis products down to a more reasonable level where people don't want to bother growing in their own home, that I think is a solution to a lot of these issues. We want cannabis to be like wine. People who are growing it for themselves or those who are really into it are hobbyists. But the average user shouldn't want to bother doing that because they can buy a high-quality, reasonably priced product in a store, and that's what it should be about. And with medical users, perhaps they shouldn't be paying as much tax or have some kind of limitation there, but I really believe that marijuana is safer than aspirin in terms of deaths and health problems that it can cause, so I think that medical marijuana should be regulated as a non-prescription substance and available to all adults who want to purchase it. So that's my vision of legalization and where I come from, and I'm happy to participate in this discussion and debate afterwards. But thank you very much for listening to my words.